The morning sun poured through the tall, narrow windows of the small-town courtroom, casting long shadows across the polished wooden benches. The room smelled faintly of old wood, polished brass, and the faint trace of disinfectant. It was a Monday morning, and the courtroom, usually quiet and routine, was buzzing with an unusual mix of anticipation and anxiety. Today's case involved the theft of valuable electronics from a local business, a crime that had rattled the community and left many questioning the safety of their own homes. The air was thick with a tense expectation that seemed almost tangible. Lawyers and police officers moved briskly, their shoes clicking against the marble floor. The prosecution team arranged evidence on a table at the front, carefully stacking boxes, bags, and small parcels. Each item had been meticulously logged and sealed in clear plastic evidence bags. The stolen items, a combination of laptops, smartphones, and small amounts of cash, sat neatly, waiting to be presented to the court. The defense attorneys whispered among themselves, reviewing notes and legal strategies, occasionally glancing at the evidence with skepticism and concern. Among the crowd was a mother, clutching her 3-year-old daughter. Emma, the little girl, sat quietly on her mother's lap, her small hands gripping a stuffed bunny, her wide brown eyes darting curiously around the courtroom. Emma was unusually observant for her age, taking in the details of the room with a level of awareness that made her mother smile nervously. She noticed the high ceilings, the rows of polished wooden benches, and the serious expressions on the faces of people who clearly took this place very seriously. Emma's mother tried to keep her daughter occupied with a small picture book, but Emma's attention was elsewhere. Something about the atmosphere, the solemnity, the quiet murmurs, and especially the presence of the police dog captivated her. At the front of the courtroom, the star of the day, Rex, a large German Shepherd police dog, sat obediently beside his handler, Officer Daniels. Rex's coat was a glossy black-brown, his posture impeccable, and his eyes sharp and alert. He exuded a sense of authority and intelligence that made the courtroom fall silent whenever he moved or even shifted slightly. Trained for months in detecting stolen items and tracking suspects, Rex was no ordinary dog. He had assisted in dozens of cases. His keen sense of smell often leading to breakthroughs when human investigators reached dead ends. The officers spoke quietly to each other about Rex's success rate, and even the judge, a stern and experienced man with decades on the bench, occasionally nodded in quiet respect at the dog's reputation. Emma, however, seemed to see something different. She tilted her head, her tiny eyebrows furrowing in concentration as she studied Rex. There was no fear in her gaze, only fascination. While other children might shy away from a large, imposing dog in a courtroom, Emma leaned slightly forward, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Why is he here, Mommy?" she asked softly, her voice almost inaudible above the shuffle of papers and whispers of the adults around her. Her mother leaned down and whispered back, trying to keep the explanation simple. "He's a police dog, sweetheart. He helps find things that people try to hide. He's very smart, just like a detective." Emma's face lit up, a tiny smile spreading across her cheeks. She tilted her head closer to Rex, her lips moving as if she were already forming words to speak to him. The adults around her were too focused on the case to notice, but the dog's ears twitched slightly, as if sensing her presence. Officer Daniels, standing nearby, gave Rex a subtle pat on the shoulder, and Rex shifted, alert but calm, his gaze sweeping over the room. The judge banged his gavel lightly, calling the courtroom to order. "We will now proceed with the case of the stolen electronics. The prosecution may present their opening statements." The room fell silent again, the hum of tension returning. Lawyers began speaking in measured tones, recounting the events leading up to the theft, the recovery of partial evidence, and the investigation's initial findings. Witnesses were called, and the officers presented their reports. Through it all, Emma remained focused on Rex, whispering small words under her breath, a low murmur that no adult paid attention to. As the lawyers spoke, the camera crews from the local news outlets adjusted their lenses, capturing the proceedings for the evening broadcast. They were more interested in the theft case itself, a story of community concern and police diligence. Yet, unknowingly, they were also capturing the subtle interaction between a 3-year-old girl and a police dog that would soon become the highlight of the day. Emma's whispers grew slightly louder, though still soft enough to seem like innocent toddler chatter. "Look, over there," she said, pointing with her tiny finger at one of the evidence bags. She did not understand the legal significance, nor did she comprehend the full gravity of the case. But somehow, her instincts, pure and untainted, were guiding her attention. Rex's ears twitched again, his nose lifting slightly as he caught a faint scent that others could not detect. He shifted his weight forward, his body tense but controlled. Officer Daniels watched him closely, a hint of surprise in his eyes. The courtroom, meanwhile, remained unaware. The prosecution continued their careful presentation, outlining the sequence of events, the break-in at the electronics store, the alarm system, and the discovery of footprints that led to partial identification of the suspect. Defense lawyers argued the case methodically, questioning the reliability of witness testimonies and the handling of evidence. But in the midst of this formal chaos, Emma leaned closer to Rex, speaking softly again. "This one," she said, pointing to a small black bag tucked beneath the table. Her mother glanced at her, unsure whether to intervene, but Emma's gaze was unwavering, her tiny hands steady. Something shifted in the room without anyone noticing. Rex's head turned sharply toward the bag Emma had indicated. His tail lowered slightly, his posture alert, and his nose twitched as he sniffed the air. Officer Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Interesting," he murmured, stepping closer to the bag, careful not to draw attention. He crouched slightly, observing Rex's reaction. The dog, trained to respond to specific scents, seemed unusually focused. It was as if the small girl's innocent gesture had directed him. The judge cleared his throat, unaware of the subtle drama unfolding before him. "Order in the court," he said, scanning the room. Emma's mother squeezed her daughter's hand, whispering softly, "Just watch, honey." Emma smiled, a mixture of pride and excitement evident on her face. She did not yet understand that she had drawn the attention of a highly trained police dog, or that the tiny observation she had made could change the course of the trial. The courtroom's atmosphere, already tense from the case, now held a silent curiosity. People leaned forward slightly, catching small glimpses of the unusual interaction between child and dog. Reporters whispered to each other, noting the unexpected focus Emma had on Rex. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. But there was a sense of anticipation building in the room, a feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. Emma's gaze remained locked on Rex, her small mind focused on details that adults had overlooked. She noticed the slight tilt of his head, the way his paws shifted, and the faint scent he followed with his nose. Though she could not articulate the reason, she knew something was hidden somewhere, something important. Her curiosity, pure and undistracted by adult worries, guided her instincts. And Rex, a dog trained for precision and obedience, responded as if recognizing a kindred intelligence in the child before him. As the morning proceedings continued, the stage was set for an unexpected moment that no one in the courtroom, neither judge, lawyer, officer, nor reporter could have predicted. A quiet, observant toddler, armed only with innocence and curiosity, had captured the attention of a highly trained police dog. The tension in the room, already thick with anticipation over the theft case, now mingled with wonder, a sense that today's events might transcend routine legal procedure. And so, in that small courtroom on a bright morning, the story of Emma and Rex quietly began, unnoticed by most, but poised to become a tale the town, and eventually the nation, would never forget. The trial, meant to showcase human investigation and police procedure, had unknowingly introduced an extraordinary duo, a 3-year-old girl and a dog, whose instincts would soon combine in an astonishing and unforgettable way. The courtroom hummed with a low murmur of legal voices, the rustle of papers, and the occasional click of a camera shutter as reporters documented the day's proceedings. Emma, perched on her mother's lap, barely noticed the adult conversations. Her wide brown eyes were fixed intently on Rex, the black and brown German shepherd, sitting silently at the front of the courtroom. Something about him fascinated her, the calm intelligence in his eyes, the subtle way his ears twitched at the sound of whispered instructions from Officer Daniels, and the sheer gravity of his presence. Unlike most toddlers who might squirm or fidget during long proceedings, Emma was perfectly still, her tiny body rigid with focus. Her mother, aware of her daughter's unusual intensity, whispered gently, "Emma, sweetheart, try to sit quietly." Emma nodded, but her attention never wavered. "Mommy," she murmured, almost too softly for anyone else to hear. "Why does he sit like that?" Her mother leaned closer, trying to explain in terms a 3-year-old could understand. "He's a special dog, honey. He helps police find things people try to hide. He's very smart, like a detective who can smell everything." Emma's face lit up at the idea. She had always loved animals, and the thought of a dog that could find things thrilled her. She studied Rex closely, noticing the shine of his coat, the way his muscles moved subtly beneath his fur, and the intensity of his gaze. She could sense his alertness, even from across the room. While adults were focused on legal arguments, Emma was forming a connection with Rex, one that transcended words or formal instructions. "Can I talk to him, Mommy?" she asked softly, her small hand brushing against Rex's direction. Her mother hesitated, glancing toward Officer Daniels. The handler was occupied, focused on the ongoing trial, but he noticed the child's fascination. Rex shifted slightly, his ears perking up in acknowledgement of Emma's attention. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone not paying close attention, but to Emma, it was a sign. "You can whisper to him," her mother finally said, unsure if she was encouraging something proper. "But be very quiet." Emma's eyes sparkled, and she leaned forward just a little, cupping her hands near her mouth. "Hello, Mr. Dog," she whispered, her voice soft but confident. "Can you find it?" Rex's head tilted slightly, as if processing her words. Officer Daniels's eyes widened slightly in surprise. The dog had been trained to respond to scents and commands, not to a toddler's soft murmurings. Yet in that moment, Rex's attention seemed to shift directly toward the direction Emma was gesturing. The courtroom continued its serious rhythm of testimony, but Emma's quiet curiosity had begun an unspoken conversation with the dog. Emma leaned closer, pointing subtly toward a small, unassuming bag sitting near the evidence table. "Over there," she whispered, almost like a secret. Rex's nose twitched, and he shifted his stance, moving a fraction closer to the bag. Officer Daniels noticed the behavior and raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual," he muttered, crouching slightly to observe. The dog's response was not random. It was deliberate, focused. It was as though the little girl had directed him to something important, though she had no understanding of the significance herself. Emma continued, her curiosity growing stronger. Look here," she said, pointing toward another corner of the evidence area. She was not shouting, but her voice carried a sense of urgency that seemed to resonate with Rex. The dog's tail lowered slightly, his body tense but controlled, and his nose lifted as he sniffed in the direction she indicated. Officer Daniels whispered under his breath, "He's reacting to her?" The judge, reading through documents, remained unaware of the subtle interaction occurring at the front of the courtroom. Lawyers were focused on presenting arguments and evidence, oblivious to the quiet miracle unfolding in their midst. Reporters scribbled notes and adjusted their cameras, more concerned with the high-profile theft case than a toddler's fascination with a police dog. Yet for those paying attention, the tension in the air had shifted. A sense of anticipation hung over the room, almost electric, as if the universe had conspired to allow this unusual duo to connect. Emma's mother watched nervously, unsure whether she should intervene. She had never seen her daughter display such focus, such determination. Emma's small hands moved gently, as if guiding Rex with invisible strings. "Can you find it, Mr. Dog?" she whispered again. The dog, trained to detect the faintest trace of stolen items, responded instinctively to her gestures. He inched closer to the bag she had pointed out, his body low and alert. Officer Daniels stepped forward cautiously, examining the item, but did not remove it. He was astonished. The subtle reactions of the dog did not go unnoticed by others now. A few members of the jury exchanged puzzled glances. One of the courtroom clerks leaned slightly forward, whispering to a colleague, "Is that Kid?" telling the dog where to look. The other clerk shrugged, unsure whether to believe what they were seeing. Meanwhile, Emma's confidence grew. She had discovered a connection, and though she did not understand its implications, she sensed its importance. Emma pointed toward another piece of evidence, a small black bag partially hidden under a chair. "That one," she said softly but firmly. Rex's ears twitched, his muscles tensing, and he moved deliberately toward the bag. Officer Daniels's eyes widened in disbelief. He had trained Rex for years, and while the dog had incredible instincts, this behavior was unprecedented. A toddler, with no training, no understanding of police procedure, was guiding a trained canine. The realization struck him silent and cold. The courtroom, oblivious, continued its routine. The defense attorney raised objections, and the prosecution responded with legal arguments. Yet, the real drama had shifted subtly to the front of the room. Emma's small voice, guided by curiosity and innocence, was orchestrating a silent investigation that no adult had anticipated. The dog's reactions were deliberate, precise, and unnervingly accurate. Emma's instincts, pure and untainted, were guiding him towards something hidden, something crucial. Emma's mother whispered softly, "Be careful, honey." But Emma was undeterred. She leaned closer, her voice a tiny thread in the vast courtroom, connecting her with Rex in a way words could not describe. "Can you smell it?" she asked, tilting her head in question. The dog responded immediately, nose down, body stiffening, alert to the faintest trace of scent. Officer Daniels's heart raced. He had never seen this combination of intuition and canine precision. As the minutes passed, Emma's whispers became more focused. Here it is," she said, pointing to a corner of the evidence table. Rex froze, sniffing the air, then lowered his head toward the exact spot she had indicated. The subtle reactions, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, were deliberate. Emma's tiny hand had guided a dog trained to detect stolen items, a feat that defied logic. Officer Daniels bent closer, examining the bag, confirming that it contained items recently recovered, but not yet properly logged in the courtroom records. The subtle drama had begun to draw attention. A few curious spectators noticed the unusual interaction, whispering among themselves. The murmurs grew louder as people realized the seriousness of the situation. A 3-year-old child had, through sheer curiosity and instinct, engaged with a trained police dog in a way that no one thought possible. Emma, still unaware of the attention she was drawing, continued to observe Rex, her eyes wide and focused. By mid-morning, the tension in the courtroom had shifted. What had begun as a routine theft case was now tinged with a sense of wonder. The connection between Emma and Rex, subtle yet unmistakable, had captured the attention of a few perceptive officers and spectators. It was clear that something extraordinary was unfolding, though no one yet fully understood its implications. Emma, in her innocent brilliance, had discovered a silent partnership with Rex that would soon alter the course of the trial in ways no one could anticipate. And so, the day progressed, the courtroom oblivious to the small miracle quietly unfolding at the front. A toddler's curiosity, pure and undistracted, had begun a chain of events that would leave everyone, judge, lawyers, officers, and spectators alike astonished. Emma's whispers to Rex were more than innocent babble. They were the first steps in a story of courage, intuition, and an unlikely partnership that would soon captivate the entire town. The courtroom had settled into the steady rhythm of the trial, yet a subtle shift hung in the air, almost imperceptible but undeniable. Emma's tiny presence on her mother's lap had gone from background detail to the focus of quiet fascination. She had been whispering to Rex for several minutes now, her soft words carrying a certainty that belied her 3 years of life. "Here, over here," she murmured, tilting her head toward a small, nondescript bag near the edge of the evidence table. Rex, the German shepherd, responded immediately, moving with calculated precision toward the bag. Officer Daniels's eyes widened. This was unlike any behavior he had ever trained for. The dog's shift was subtle but deliberate. His nose twitched, scanning the air, his body poised for detection. He stopped briefly, then pawed gently at the bag, nudging it with a quiet insistence. A few nearby spectators began to notice. A juror leaned forward, murmuring to her neighbor, "Is that a dog?" The neighbor shook her head, unsure what she had just seen. At that moment, the quiet rhythm of the courtroom, the shuffle of papers, the scratching of pens, the low hum of whispered questions paused, as if the room collectively sensed something extraordinary unfolding. Emma's mother held her breath, unsure if she should intervene or let the moment continue. She had never witnessed her daughter display such focus, such intuition, and above all, such a unique connection with an animal. "Emma," she whispered softly, "be careful." But Emma barely registered her mother's words. Her tiny hands pointed, her voice barely audible above a whisper. "Look, it's here." The dog, trained to respond to scents of stolen items, hesitated only for a fraction of a second, and pressed forward. Officer Daniels, kneeling nearby, had trouble hiding his astonishment. He had worked with Rex for nearly 7 years, and had never observed such a response to a child's direction. Typically, Rex required specific commands and scent confirmation. Yet here, with no verbal command or explicit scent cue from an adult, the dog seemed to understand the toddler's intention. Daniels whispered under his breath, "Incredible. He's reacting to her." He straightened slightly, keeping a close eye on Rex while maintaining professional composure. Emma's whispers grew bolder, guided by intuition more than knowledge. "Check it?" "That one," she murmured, pointing to another small, partially concealed bag under the table. Rex paused, sniffing the air, then moved deliberately toward her indicated spot. Gasps rippled quietly through the courtroom. The judge, absorbed in reviewing documents, glanced up and noticed the subtle commotion. "What is happening here?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. Several spectators pointed toward the dog and the child, their voices low but filled with disbelief. The prosecution team exchanged puzzled glances. "Is that child directing the dog?" One whispered to a colleague. The defense team, initially confident in their approach, paused mid-argument, sensing an unexpected shift in the courtroom's energy. The spectators leaned forward, cameras adjusting to capture a scene that defied explanation. A toddler quietly guiding a trained, police dogged toward key pieces of evidence. Emma, oblivious to the astonished attention she was attracting, remained focused entirely on Rex, her eyes wide and intent. Rex's body language was precise, controlled, yet filled with intensity. He sniffed the air, pausing at each point Emma indicated, then pawed gently at the target. Officer Daniels approached the bag Emma had first pointed to, confirming its contents. A small collection of electronics, partially recovered, but not yet properly logged. His jaw tightened in surprise. She? She's actually guiding him, he muttered under his breath. The realization sent a ripple of astonishment through him. Emma, unaware of the magnitude of her actions, leaned slightly closer to Rex, whispering again, "Over here. Find it here." The dog's nose twitched as he sniffed. Then he gently pawed at a second bag, partially hidden under the table. Officer Daniels quickly verified the contents. It matched reports of items recently recovered in the investigation, but previously overlooked. The courtroom's whispers grew louder, a low murmur of disbelief spreading through the audience. The judge, now fully aware of the unusual interaction, adjusted his glasses and observed silently. His stern expression gave way to a hint of amazement. "Is that a child directing the K-9? He asked softly, more to himself than anyone else. A few officers nodded, sharing glances that expressed both astonishment and uncertainty. The courtroom had transitioned from a procedural environment to a stage of quiet wonder. Emma's innocent curiosity had unexpectedly become central to the case, influencing proceedings in a way no adult could have anticipated. Emma's mother, still holding her daughter, whispered a mixture of caution and pride. "Emma, that's enough," she said softly, unsure how much influence a 3-year-old should have in a formal setting. Emma ignored her gently, her focus unwavering. She was guided by instinct, not understanding of legal procedure, and yet her choices were deliberate. Each gesture, each whispered word, had a precise effect on Rex, who continued to respond with exactitude. The murmurs in the courtroom continued, spreading like wildfire. Some spectators were incredulous, exchanging quiet speculation. "How is this possible?" one asked, shaking his head. "I've never seen anything like it," whispered another. Cameras clicked, reporters scribbled notes, and officers observed cautiously, unsure how to proceed without disrupting the delicate chain of events. It was clear that Emma's interaction with Rex was something rare, perhaps unprecedented. Emma paused, then leaned forward slightly, her small fingers pointing toward a corner of the evidence table, where a small black bag sat partially hidden by papers. "Here," she whispered firmly. Rex froze, sniffed the air with intensity, then pressed his nose against the bag, pawing it gently. Officer Daniels approached slowly, confirming the contents, another item of recovered property overlooked in the initial sorting. His eyes widened further in disbelief. A ripple of astonishment swept through the courtroom. Reporters adjusted their lenses to capture the scene. The jurors leaned forward, murmuring quietly. Even the defense attorneys appeared unsettled, their confident composure faltering. The child, with no understanding of the legal system or evidence handling, had guided a trained K-9 to critical items in the case. The adult world, rigid in its formal procedures and protocols, had been momentarily appended by a tiny voice and an instinctive connection. Emma, still unaware of the attention she had drawn, continued to observe Rex with quiet intensity. She whispered once more, "Check there." "Yes, right there." The dog, trained for accuracy and alertness, responded immediately. Officer Daniels, crouching near the bag, verified that it contained a portion of the recovered electronics, items crucial to the case. The realization was staggering. A 3-year-old had effectively assisted in evidence recovery, a role traditionally reserved for highly trained professionals. By mid-morning, the courtroom had shifted from procedural monotony to quiet awe. Emma's interaction with Rex had captured the attention of nearly everyone present. The story unfolding before them was unusual, unexpected, and astonishing. It was no longer just about the theft case. It had become a tale of intuition, innocence, and extraordinary connection between human and animal. The judge, maintaining decorum, adjusted his robe and watched carefully, fully aware that the events about to unfold could redefine the day's proceedings. Rex, guided by Emma's subtle gestures and quiet whispers, continued to move with precision. He approached each area she indicated, sniffing, pawing, and confirming the presence of items connected to the theft. Officer Daniels, though trained and experienced, remained in awe. He realized that what he was witnessing might be a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence, a toddler intuitively directing a police dog to critical pieces of evidence. The courtroom murmurs grew louder, but no one disrupted the natural rhythm of Emma and Rex's interaction. The prosecution team paused briefly, unsure whether to comment or intervene. The defense team watched in disbelief, recognizing that the child's intuitive guidance had altered the balance of attention in the room. Emma, entirely absorbed in her task, remained oblivious to the significance of her actions. She was guided by instinct and curiosity, pure and untarnished by adult concerns. By late morning, it was clear that Emma had established an unspoken partnership with Rex. The dog, highly trained and disciplined, responded to her gestures and whispers with uncanny precision. Officer Daniels marveled at the accuracy, noting that every indication from the child led him to an item of evidence that had previously gone unnoticed. The courtroom, once tense with procedural seriousness, was now captivated by the unfolding miracle of this unlikely duo. And so, the first surprising connection between a 3-year-old and a trained canine police dog was established. A silent understanding, intuitive and powerful, had begun to shape the course of the trial. What had started as innocent curiosity was transforming into a partnership that would astonish everyone present, from the judge and lawyers to the officers and spectators. Emma and Rex had formed a bond that transcended words, creating a moment of wonder that would soon become the heart of the story. The courtroom, still humming with the low murmur of legal proceedings, now carried a quiet, almost electric tension. What had once been a routine trial about stolen electronics had quietly transformed into something extraordinary. Emma, the tiny observer on her mother's lap, had captured the attention of nearly everyone without even realizing it. Her fascination with Rex, the police dog, had evolved into a subtle dialogue that no adult could fully comprehend. Each whisper, each tiny gesture had guided Rex with startling precision, and now the room was beginning to understand that something remarkable was unfolding. Emma leaned slightly forward, her small fingers pointing deliberately toward a corner of the evidence table. "There," she whispered, almost like a secret shared with Rex alone. The dog's ears twitched, his nose lifting as he sniffed the air. Officer Daniels crouched nearby, his heart pounding. He had worked with Rex for nearly 7 years and had seen him react to countless scenarios, but he had never witnessed anything like this. The precision of Rex's movements, guided entirely by a toddler's instinctive gestures, was nothing short of astonishing. The judge, reading through the evidence file, finally looked up, sensing the subtle shift in the courtroom. "Is there unusual activity occurring at the front?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. A few officers exchanged glances, hesitant to interrupt proceedings. One leaned forward slightly, whispering, "It appears the child is guiding the dog." The word guiding seemed inadequate, but it captured the essence of what was happening. Emma's innocent intuition had somehow directed a trained canine toward critical evidence. Emma's mother held her breath, unsure whether to encourage her daughter or call attention to the situation. She had never seen Emma focus with such intensity, her tiny body radiating both concentration and confidence. Emma, however, remained oblivious to the significance of her actions. Her mind, unburdened by adult concerns, was guided purely by instinct. She tilted her head slightly, whispered again, "Here." "It's here," pointing toward a small, unassuming black bag partially hidden behind a chair. Rex responded instantly. His body stiffened, muscles taut beneath his glossy coat, as he approached the bag with careful precision. He sniffed, pawed gently, and nudged it toward the open space in front of the table. Officer Daniels's eyes widened as he carefully examined the bag, confirming its contents. A collection of electronics that had been recovered, but overlooked during the initial evidence cataloging. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. No one could believe what they were witnessing. A 3-year-old directing a K-9 to items critical to a criminal investigation. The courtroom whispers grew louder, though subdued to maintain decorum. A few members of the jury leaned forward, exchanging astonished glances. The prosecution paused momentarily, recognizing that the child's intuitive actions had become a factor in the proceedings. Even the defense attorneys seemed unsettled, their previously confident composure faltering. Emma's small voice, innocent and untrained, had disrupted the courtroom's procedural rhythm in a way that no one could have predicted. Emma leaned forward again, her tiny hand pointing toward another bag tucked under the evidence table. "That one, too," she whispered firmly. Rex paused, then sniffed the air, moving with deliberate accuracy toward the location she had indicated. Officer Daniels carefully confirmed the bag's contents. Another portion of the recovered items, overlooked and previously unexamined. The realization struck the officers with an almost tangible force. A toddler had guided a trained police dog to evidence crucial for the prosecution. The judge, now fully aware of the situation, adjusted his glasses and observed with a mixture of astonishment and curiosity. "Order in the court," he said softly, though his tone carried no real authority over the unfolding spectacle. Everyone in the courtroom leaned forward slightly, captivated by the scene. Emma, still completely absorbed, seemed unaware of the attention she had drawn. Her focus was entirely on Rex, her whispers and gestures guiding him with an uncanny precision that defied explanation. Reporter cameras clicked discreetly, capturing the unusual interaction. A few whispered conversations broke out among spectators. "Is that a child telling the dog what to do?" One murmured, unable to hide her amazement. "It's incredible," another replied softly. Eyes fixed on the tiny girl and the attentive K-9, the murmurs spread quietly through the courtroom, building an undercurrent of disbelief and fascination. Emma, however, remained blissfully unaware of the impact of her actions. She was simply observing, pointing, and whispering, guided by curiosity and instinct. Officer Daniels, still crouched near Rex, shook his head in disbelief. "I've trained him for years," he murmured to himself, "and never seen anything like this." The dog's reactions were deliberate, controlled, and incredibly precise. Each indication Emma made, no matter how subtle, was translated into action by Rex with exactitude. It was as if the child and the dog shared an unspoken understanding, a silent communication that bypassed logic and training. Emma's whispers grew slightly louder, though still soft enough to be interpreted as innocent toddler speech. "Check there." "Yes, right there," she said, pointing to a bag partially hidden behind the judge's bench. Rex immediately responded, moving with careful precision to the indicated location. Officer Daniels verified the contents. Electronics that had been reported, stolen but not fully recovered during earlier searches. The room's astonishment grew. What had begun as innocent curiosity was now verging on extraordinary intervention. The courtroom had entered a state of hushed awe. Spectators leaned forward, Jurors whispered to one another, and even the prosecution team seemed captivated. Emma's intuitive guidance had not only influenced the K-9's actions, but had altered the flow of the case itself. The defense team, usually confident in questioning evidence, appeared unsure how to proceed, recognizing that a toddler had inadvertently become central to the investigation. Emma's mother whispered, "Honey, that's enough," but Emma ignored her gently. She was fully absorbed in the task at hand, unaware of the magnitude of her actions. She leaned closer to Rex, her small voice steady and confident. "It's here. You found it," she exclaimed softly. Rex, responding with a wag of his tail and a gentle paw at the evidence, seemed to acknowledge her approval. Officer Daniels took a deep breath, still trying to process the unusual scenario. A toddler guiding a police dog with remarkable accuracy. By late morning, Emma had pointed out multiple pieces of evidence, each confirmed by Rex and verified by the officers. The courtroom had transitioned from formal procedural decorum to an atmosphere of wonder. Reporters adjusted cameras, jurors whispered in astonishment, and spectators leaned forward in disbelief. Emma, oblivious to the magnitude of the attention, continued to observe and guide, her instincts flawless. The judge finally cleared his throat, acknowledging the remarkable events. "This is highly unusual," he said, his voice steady but reflective. "We will continue the proceedings, but I ask all parties to take note of the child's interaction with the K-9. A murmur of agreement rippled through the courtroom. Everyone, from lawyers to officers to spectators, recognized the unprecedented nature of the moment. Emma's intuition, pure and unfiltered by experience, had revealed hidden evidence with astonishing accuracy. Rex, still focused and alert, completed his systematic examination, guided entirely by the child's gestures. Officer Daniels, crouching nearby, could only shake his head in amazement. "Incredible," he whispered again. She's extraordinary." Emma, for her part, smiled, satisfied with her observations, and unaware of the impact she had made. The small courtroom, once rigid with formalities, had become a stage for an extraordinary display of intuition, innocence, and an unlikely partnership between a toddler and a police dog. By the end of the morning session, it was clear. Emma's intuition had changed the course of the trial. Items overlooked during standard investigation procedures had been identified, verified, and recovered. All thanks to a 3-year-old's curiosity and her unspoken connection with Rex. The courtroom would never forget the quiet, astonishing moment when innocence and instinct combined to produce results even seasoned professionals could not achieve. The courtroom, once filled with routine murmurs and procedural shuffles, had transformed into an arena of quiet astonishment. The subtle whispers of curiosity and disbelief had grown into an undercurrent of attention that no one could ignore. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, exchanging glances that spoke of incredulity and fascination. Even the jury, accustomed to maintaining professional composure, found themselves captivated. The focus of the courtroom had shifted, not toward the lawyers nor the evidence itself, but toward the tiny figure on her mother's lap and the remarkable German shepherd at the front. Emma, unaware of the attention she was drawing, continued her subtle instructions to Rex. "Over there." "Yes, check that one," she whispered, pointing with her small hand toward another partially concealed bag. The dog, trained for years to respond to scent and command, moved with uncanny precision, sniffing and nudging the item exactly as Emma had indicated. Officer Daniels, crouched nearby, could hardly believe his eyes. He had worked with Rex on hundreds of cases, but never had he witnessed a child, entirely untrained in canine or investigative procedure, influence a dog's actions with such exactitude. The judge, finally rising from his documents, adjusted his glasses and observed the scene with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. "What is occurring at the front of the courtroom?" he asked, his voice calm, yet carrying a hint of awe. The officers exchanged subtle nods, their expressions a mixture of astonishment and cautious approval. The prosecution team paused in mid-argument, while the defense team fell silent, recognizing that the small child's influence had become central to the proceedings. Even the reporters, previously focused on the high-profile theft case, redirected their attention, capturing frames of Emma and Rex with heightened interest. Whispers rippled through the spectators' gallery, growing in intensity. "Is that child really directing the dog?" one murmured. "I don't believe it," another replied, shaking her head. Yet no one could dispute what they were seeing. Emma's tiny gestures and whispered words were consistently guiding Rex to bags of evidence that had been previously overlooked. Each interaction was deliberate, precise, and astonishingly effective. The courtroom had become a silent stage for a performance that no one had anticipated. Emma's mother, torn between awe and apprehension, whispered softly, "Honey, that's enough." But Emma, absorbed in her task, ignored the caution. Her small eyes were fixed on Rex, her tiny hand guiding him toward a corner of the evidence table. "Look, over there," she murmured, and Rex responded instantly, nudging the bag toward the open area. Officer Daniels, carefully verifying the contents, confirmed that the bag held additional stolen electronics, further establishing the child's inadvertent, yet remarkable contribution. The jurors, initially skeptical, now whispered among themselves in disbelief. One leaned over and murmured, "I've never seen anything like this." A child guiding a police dog. The other jurors nodded, eyes wide, as they realized the implications. Even the prosecution, typically focused on presenting evidence with methodical precision, could not ignore the effectiveness of Emma's guidance. The defense, meanwhile, shifted uneasily in their seats, unsure how to respond to a scenario so unprecedented. The courtroom, once steeped in procedural formality, had become a stage for awe and wonder. Emma, oblivious to the attention, leaned closer to Rex and whispered again, "Check here." "Yes, right there." The dog responded, sniffing, pawing, and nudging items precisely as she indicated. Officer Daniels, crouching beside the dog, could only marvel. "I don't understand how she's doing this," he whispered softly. "But it's working." The subtle synchronization between child and dog was both remarkable and inexplicable. A perfect blend of intuition and trained instinct. The judge, now fully aware, adjusted his posture in his chair and spoke with a mix of authority and amazement. "I must request that everyone observe this situation carefully," he said, glancing toward the lawyers and officers. "What we are witnessing is highly unusual and warrants careful consideration. The child's interaction with the K-9 has directly influenced the retrieval of evidence in this case." His words, though measured, carried weight. The courtroom had shifted from a space of procedural decorum to one of wonder and respect. Spectators murmured, cameras clicked, and whispers spread like wildfire. People were captivated by the sight of a 3-year-old silently directing a trained police dog with precision and confidence. Emma's actions, innocent and instinctive, had created a ripple effect across the courtroom. What had begun as a routine investigation into stolen electronics had now become a story of intuition, trust, and a bond that defied conventional understanding. Officer Daniels finally spoke aloud, addressing the judge and the room with a mixture of awe and professionalism. "Your Honor, I've worked with Rex for 7 years. He responds to scent and command like no other dog I've trained, but this is unlike anything I've ever witnessed. The child appears to be guiding him with absolute accuracy." The courtroom gasped softly. Emma's mother squeezed her daughter's hand, a mixture of pride and disbelief etched on her face. Emma, still completely absorbed, tilted her head and pointed toward another partially hidden bag. "This one," she whispered softly. Rex responded instantly, nudging the bag into open view. Officer Daniels confirmed the contents. Additional stolen electronics, previously unnoticed. The spectators, jurors, and lawyers alike were now fully aware of the significance of the child's actions. Emma's seemingly innocent curiosity had altered the trajectory of the trial in real time. The defense team, normally confident in controlling the narrative, exchanged uneasy glances. They whispered among themselves, unsure how to challenge or respond to a 3-year-old's intuitive guidance. The prosecution, conversely, leaned forward, quietly acknowledging the benefit of this unexpected assistance. The jury, captivated by the extraordinary sight before them, remained engaged in a way few court proceedings ever achieved. The room had become a stage for something extraordinary, a perfect convergence of innocence, instinct, and trained skill. Emma's whispers became slightly more insistent, though still soft. "Look, check there," she murmured, tilting her tiny hand toward yet another item. Rex responded immediately, sniffing and pawing, retrieving another bag that contained crucial evidence for the case. Officer Daniels carefully documented the finding, his heart racing with amazement. Never before had he witnessed a toddler demonstrate such precise intuition, guiding a canine to recover overlooked items. The judge, now fully engaged, leaned forward in his seat. "I must reiterate," he said, his voice calm yet firm, "that what we are witnessing is highly unusual. The child's actions have influenced the recovery of evidence in a manner that defies explanation. All parties must take note." His words echoed throughout the courtroom, signaling that the extraordinary events were being formally acknowledged. The spectators, jurors, and reporters were now fully captivated. Cameras focused on the child and the dog, capturing each gesture and response. Whispers of amazement filled the room, blending with the usual rustle of legal proceedings. Emma, blissfully unaware of the attention, continued her subtle guidance, her instincts flawless, her focus unwavering. She had created an unspoken bond with Rex, one that transcended age, training, and expectation. Officer Daniels, observing the dog and child in perfect synchronization, finally spoke aloud. "This is incredible. I've never seen a canine respond to a child with such accuracy. She's remarkable." His words, though quiet, carried weight. The courtroom collectively absorbed the reality. A 3-year-old's intuition had influenced a trained police dog to retrieve evidence essential to the case. By mid-morning, the courtroom had completely shifted. Emma's subtle guidance of Rex had transformed the day's proceedings into an extraordinary display of intuition, trust, and interspecies communication. Spectators whispered, jurors leaned forward, lawyers paused in amazement, and reporters scrambled to capture the unfolding story. The child and the dog, united in a silent and intuitive partnership, had captivated the entire courtroom, leaving no doubt that something extraordinary had taken place. And so, as the morning progressed, the courtroom reacted, not with disbelief alone, but with admiration and awe. Emma's intuition had revealed hidden evidence, altered the dynamics of the trial, and created a moment that would be remembered long after the gavel fell. In that small courtroom, a 3-year-old and a police dog had captured the hearts and minds of everyone present, proving that sometimes insight and brilliance can come from the most unexpected sources. By mid-morning, the courtroom had shifted from procedural formality to a quiet theater of wonder. Emma, perched on her mother's lap, had become the unintentional star of the day. The initial curiosity she had displayed toward Rex had grown into a partnership that no one judge, lawyers, officers, or spectators could have anticipated. Whispers of astonishment had filled the gallery. Cameras captured every subtle gesture, and jurors leaned forward with wide-eyed focus. The tiny girl's instincts were guiding a highly trained police dog to critical evidence, and the reality of it was slowly dawning on everyone present. Emma, fully absorbed in her task, pointed again toward a small corner under the evidence table. "Here, look," she whispered, her finger trembling slightly with excitement. Rex, highly trained, but responding now to subtle cues and the child's intuitive gestures, approached the indicated spot. His paws nudged at a small, unassuming black bag, partially hidden from view. Officer Daniels crouched beside him, carefully examining the bag, and as he opened it, his eyes widened. Inside lay electronics and cash-stolen items that had gone unaccounted for in the initial recovery. The courtroom gasped collectively, the sound like a ripple of disbelief, traveling from the front row to the back. The judge, leaning forward in his seat, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "This is extraordinary," he said. His tone was calm, but a subtle tremor of astonishment betrayed his composed exterior. "We have witnessed a child, an infant, really guide a trained canine to recover evidence that was previously unaccounted for. I want all parties to note this unusual development." His words, carefully measured yet undeniably acknowledging the moment, resonated throughout the courtroom. Emma's mother squeezed her daughter's hand tightly, a mixture of pride and awe reflected in her expression. The defense attorneys, previously confident in challenging evidence, now whispered anxiously among themselves. One leaned toward his colleague and muttered, Do we challenge this? How do you argue against a child and a dog?" The prosecution team, conversely, shared subtle glances of astonishment, recognizing that the child's guidance had provided a critical breakthrough. Jurors whispered in disbelief, their faces filled with awe. The courtroom had shifted from routine procedure to an almost cinematic display of intuition and trust. Emma, unaware of the magnitude of attention, leaned closer to Rex, her small frame vibrating with excitement. "Check there." "Yes, right there," she whispered again, pointing toward another partially concealed area beneath the table. Rex responded immediately, his nose sniffing the air, paws nudging the location she indicated. Officer Daniels verified the contents. More recovered electronics, partially overlooked during earlier searches, were now fully accounted for. The courtroom murmurs grew louder, filled with astonishment and curiosity. The day's events had taken on the feeling of a carefully orchestrated miracle. The judge, observing the unfolding scene, remained composed but clearly impressed. "This is a situation I have never encountered in my career," he said. "A toddler's instinct has guided a highly trained canine to evidence previously overlooked. All parties should remain mindful of the significance." His acknowledgement was quiet yet firm, lending the entire courtroom a sense of legitimacy regarding the extraordinary occurrence. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, cameras clicked in near silence, and the hushed whispers of amazement spread throughout the room. Officer Daniels, crouching beside Rex, shook his head in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like this in 7 years," he whispered to himself, unable to contain his awe. The dog, trained to respond to commands and sense alone, had followed the tiny girl's guidance with remarkable accuracy. Emma's intuition, pure and untainted by procedure or training, had created results that were otherwise unattainable. Each whispered word and subtle gesture had become a tool in the recovery of critical evidence. Emma, sensing that something significant was happening, leaned a bit closer, her tiny voice carrying softly. "Here, over here, yes," she whispered, pointing to yet another area. Rex, responding with absolute precision, moved toward her indicated spot. Officer Daniels carefully examined the location and retrieved another bag of stolen items, adding to the mounting collection of recovered evidence. The courtroom gasped again. Even seasoned officers could barely believe the unfolding scenario. A toddler had guided a canine to critical evidence multiple times, altering the direction of the case in real time. Spectators murmured in disbelief, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. "This is unreal," one whispered. "I've never seen anything like it," said another, eyes wide with astonishment. Reporters quietly adjusted their cameras, capturing each gesture and response, knowing that this story would dominate headlines for weeks, perhaps months. The unusual partnership between a child and a dog had transformed the courtroom into a stage for something extraordinary, a live demonstration of intuition, trust, and the unexplainable connection between human and animal. The defense attorneys, whispering urgently among themselves, realized the magnitude of the situation. "How do we challenge this?" One muttered, "It's a child and a dog. No one can argue against instinct." Their unease was palpable, their confidence shaken by a phenomenon outside the bounds of ordinary legal strategy. The prosecution, on the other hand, was cautiously optimistic, noting that the child's actions had provided evidence that could decisively influence the trial. Jurors leaned forward, captivated by the unfolding story, unable to turn away. Emma, oblivious to the attention and the high stakes, focused entirely on Rex. Her gestures were subtle, her whispers soft, yet they carried weight. "Over there." "Yes, check here," she said, her small finger pointing to a hidden corner. Rex moved immediately, sniffing and pawing as instructed. Officer Daniels verified the contents. Another crucial portion of the stolen property was recovered. The courtroom held its collective breath, astonished by the precision and consistency of the child's guidance. The judge, recognizing the unprecedented nature of the events, leaned back slightly and spoke once more. "It is clear that the child's intuition has influenced the recovery of critical evidence," he said. "All parties should acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances before us." His words carried a formal weight, legitimizing the awe and admiration spreading throughout the room. Spectators whispered excitedly, jurors exchanged stunned glances, and reporters quickly scribbled notes for what was becoming a story of national fascination. Officer Daniels, still kneeling beside Rex, finally spoke aloud, unable to contain his amazement. "This is incredible. I've never seen a canine respond to a child with such accuracy. She's remarkable." Emma, hearing the praise, smiled shyly, glancing up at her mother. She remained blissfully unaware of the magnitude of her impact. Focused entirely on the task of guiding Rex, her tiny whispers had transformed the proceedings, turning a routine theft trial into a narrative of wonder and astonishment. By late morning, the courtroom had fully recognized Emma's contribution. Items previously overlooked had been recovered, verified, and logged, all thanks to her guidance. The prosecution team quietly acknowledged the breakthrough. The defense team remained uneasy, and the spectators were captivated. Cameras clicked, jurors leaned forward, and whispers of astonishment filled the room. A 3-year-old had shifted the dynamics of the trial, her intuition and innocence guiding a trained police dog to crucial evidence. In that moment, it became clear. Emma had created a turning point. Her observations, guided by curiosity and instinct, had transformed what could have been a routine trial into a story of wonder, intuition, and the extraordinary bond between human and animal. The courtroom, once filled with tension and procedure, now buzzed with awe. For a child who had only been observing out of curiosity, the events of the morning had become an unprecedented demonstration of influence, trust, and remarkable intuition. The day's proceedings had shifted dramatically. What had begun as routine testimony and legal debate had become a moment of quiet marvel. Emma's whispered instructions had recovered evidence that may have otherwise remained hidden. Rex, responding with flawless precision, had confirmed the child's remarkable intuition. The courtroom had witnessed a turning point, one that would resonate in stories, headlines, and memories long after the trial concluded. By the time the morning session drew to a close, it was undeniable. Emma had altered the course of the case. The stolen items were accounted for, the dog had responded flawlessly, and the courtroom had been captivated by the remarkable events. The tiny child had demonstrated that insight, intuition, and innocence could achieve what years of training and experience sometimes could not. A turning point had been reached, and nothing in the courtroom or the lives of those present would ever be the same. The courtroom was electric with quiet tension. What had started as a typical theft trial had transformed into an extraordinary display of intuition, instinct, and the subtle bond between a 3-year-old and a highly trained police dog. Emma, perched on her mother's lap, had now guided Rex through the recovery of nearly all overlooked evidence. Every whisper, every gesture, had led to tangible results, leaving officers, lawyers, the judge, and spectators in awe. The courtroom held its collective breath as the prosecution prepared to summarize the day's findings, now dramatically altered by the child's unexpected intervention. Officer Daniels, kneeling beside Rex, carefully documented the recovered items. Every item she indicated was precise, he whispered to the judge. The electronics, the cash, even small items that were overlooked, all recovered because of her guidance. The judge's eyes widened slightly, his stern demeanor softening with amazement. "Remarkable," he said. "We are witnessing something unprecedented, a child guiding a trained canine to recover crucial evidence, and doing so with astonishing accuracy." Emma, oblivious to the magnitude of her role, leaned forward once more and pointed to the final bag. "Here," she whispered softly. Rex, attuned to her gestures and murmurs, nudged it open with a gentle paw. Inside lay a small stack of high-value items previously thought missing, the final pieces necessary for a complete case. Officer Daniels carefully confirmed each item, recording their presence. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of whispers, gasps, and quiet applause. The defense team, previously unsettled by the child's guidance, realized that further objections would be futile. Emma's actions had altered the trial's trajectory in an undeniable way. Even seasoned attorneys, accustomed to rigorous strategy, could not dispute the tangible outcomes. The prosecution leaned forward, their faces a mixture of relief and admiration. The recovery of evidence had strengthened their case in ways no one had anticipated. Jurors exchanged stunned glances, leaning forward in astonishment as the unusual yet undeniable events unfolded before them. Emma's mother whispered softly to her daughter, a mix of caution and pride in her voice. "Honey, you've helped so much." Emma looked up with wide, innocent eyes, her small smile radiant. She had no comprehension of the legal importance or the impact of her actions. To her, this was a simple matter of observing, pointing, and whispering, a game of discovery with her 4-legged companion. Yet the consequences of her intuitive guidance were now monumental, reshaping the course of justice in a way few could have imagined. The judge, maintaining formal authority yet clearly moved, addressed the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed an event that defies expectation. A child, through instinctive observation and untrained guidance, has assisted in the recovery of evidence critical to this case. All parties should recognize the extraordinary circumstances." His words, deliberate and respectful, carried the full weight of the legal system while acknowledging the extraordinary nature of the events. The courtroom remained hushed, every ear attuned to the significance of the statement. Officer Daniels stepped forward, speaking to the room with calm authority. "Your Honor, Rex has been trained for years to locate evidence. Never in my experience has a child guided him with such precision. Every indication she made was accurate. She has unknowingly ensured that justice can now be fully served." His words were met with quiet murmurs of awe and acknowledgement from spectators, jurors, and courtroom personnel. The gravity of the moment was unmistakable. Emma, still entirely absorbed in observing Rex, leaned slightly forward again. "All done," she whispered softly, gesturing toward the array of recovered items. Rex wagged his tail, his demeanor calm yet attentive. Officer Daniels nodded in acknowledgement, confirming that all evidence had now been accounted for. The room seemed to exhale collectively, a wave of relief and astonishment washing over everyone present. The trial, once tense with procedural formalities, had reached a pivotal point. Justice had been materially advanced, thanks to the unlikely partnership of a child and a dog. The prosecution team rose, summarizing the case now bolstered by the recovered evidence. "Your Honor, the items recovered today, guided in large part by an extraordinary intervention, conclusively demonstrate the extent of the theft and allow for full accountability," the lead attorney said. The defense team, though hesitant, recognized that further objections would appear unreasonable given the circumstances. The judge nodded solemnly, acknowledging the completion of evidence recovery while maintaining decorum. Spectators whispered excitedly, captivated by the day's unfolding drama. Cameras clicked discreetly, capturing the child's gestures, the dog's precise movements, and the subtle interactions between Emma and Rex. It was a scene that no one could have scripted. A tiny, 3-year-old child guiding a trained canine through the recovery of evidence in a formal courtroom. The unusual bond between human and animal had reshaped the trial, providing clarity and resolution that even the most seasoned professionals could not have anticipated. Emma's mother, overcome with pride, whispered softly to her daughter, "You've done something incredible today." Emma's response was a shy smile, her gaze returning to Rex. For her, it was simply a game of discovery, a way to explore and communicate with a friend who understood her in ways adults never could. Yet the impact of her actions would resonate far beyond the innocent simplicity of her perspective. Officer Daniels, kneeling near Rex, gave a subtle nod. "She's remarkable," he murmured. The dog, obedient yet aware, seemed to acknowledge the child's role, responding with calm composure. Together, they had achieved something extraordinary, a silent, intuitive collaboration that had tangible effects on the administration of justice. The courtroom had witnessed a rare and unrepeatable moment of human and animal cooperation, guided entirely by instinct and innocence. The judge, preparing to adjourn for the day, addressed the courtroom one final time. "Today, we have seen an unusual yet remarkable intervention. A child's intuitive guidance has assisted in the recovery of all critical evidence. Let this serve as a reminder that sometimes insight comes from the most unexpected places." His words carried authority and admiration, capturing the essence of the day's events. As the courtroom began to clear, whispers of awe and discussion filled the air. Reporters scrambled to record every detail. Jurors exchanged comments of astonishment, and spectators shared stories of the incredible scene they had witnessed. Emma, still holding Rex's leash gently and observing her friend, remained unaware of the attention. Her simple curiosity had evolved into a defining moment of the trial, one that would be remembered long after the final gavel fell. The case, now strengthened by the complete recovery of evidence, moved steadily toward resolution. The defendant, confronted with the comprehensive documentation and verification of all stolen items, had little room to maneuver. Justice, it seemed, was now fully achievable, guided in no small part by the unlikely partnership of a child and a police dog. The courtroom's collective focus had shifted from tension to admiration, awe, and relief. By the end of the morning, Emma had become an unexpected hero of the day. Her whispers and gestures had guided Rex through every critical piece of evidence, demonstrating a level of intuition and instinct that no one present had anticipated. The courtroom had witnessed not just the resolution of a case, but a moment of extraordinary collaboration and insight, one that defied explanation yet delivered undeniable results. As the judge finally adjourned the session, spectators, officers, and attorneys quietly acknowledged the child's impact. Cameras captured the final moments of Emma's gentle guidance, preserving for posterity the remarkable story of how innocence, intuition, and a trained canine had come together to achieve justice. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving behind the memory of an unforgettable day when a 3-year-old girl's simple curiosity became the catalyst for truth, recovery, and the triumph of justice. The courthouse had emptied, but the energy of the morning lingered like a gentle hum. Lawyers discussed the events in quiet clusters. Officers exchanged astonished glances, and jurors whispered among themselves, replaying the incredible scenes they had witnessed. Outside, news crews had already gathered, cameras poised to capture statements from witnesses, officers, and anyone willing to comment. Within hours, the story of a 3-year-old guiding a police dog through a courtroom to recover stolen evidence would spread far beyond the small town where it had occurred. Emma, still clutching Rex's leash, had no awareness of the sensation she had caused. To her, the day had been a series of discoveries and quiet conversations with a friend who understood her intuitively. Rex, ever attentive, walked calmly beside her, tail wagging, as if acknowledging her role in the day's events. Officer Daniels walked slowly behind them, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've worked with K9 units for years," he murmured, "but I've never seen anything like this. She's extraordinary." Outside the courtroom, reporters jostled for position, eager to capture reactions from those involved. The prosecution team gave brief statements, carefully emphasizing the importance of the recovered evidence. But the story everyone wanted to hear centered on the child and the dog. One reporter turned to the officers and asked, "Can you explain how a 3-year-old guided Rex so accurately?" Officer Daniels chuckled, shaking his head. "I can't explain it," he admitted. "It's not something you can train for. She just knows. There's an instinct there that's impossible to teach." Emma's mother, holding her daughter close, smiled through a mixture of pride and disbelief. "Emma, do you understand what you've done today?" she asked softly. Emma's wide eyes blinked up at her mother. "I helped Rex," she said simply, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. She had no understanding of how monumental her actions had been, no comprehension of the courtroom's astonishment or the evidence that had been recovered through her guidance. For her, it had been an adventure, a series of discoveries with a loyal friend who listened and responded. Social media quickly picked up the story, with videos of the courtroom interaction going viral within hours. News outlets ran headlines such as "3-year-old and police dog solve evidence mystery," and "Toddler guides K-9 through courtroom justice served in unusual way." The public was captivated, sharing the story widely and marveling at the unique partnership between innocence and instinct. Children and adults alike commented on the natural connection between Emma and Rex, a reminder of how extraordinary moments can emerge from unexpected sources. The courtroom staff and officers were also swept up in the attention. Emails and calls from colleagues across the state flooded in, all expressing amazement and curiosity. "I've seen some unusual cases in my career," wrote one officer, "but nothing like this. How did she know? How did Rex respond so perfectly?" Others offered congratulations, recognizing the unusual yet undeniable role the child had played in ensuring justice was achieved. The courthouse itself became a minor landmark for visitors eager to glimpse the site of the extraordinary day. Emma, oblivious to her growing fame, enjoyed a quiet moment with Rex. The dog sat patiently beside her, tail wagging slowly, as if sharing a private understanding. She giggled softly and whispered, "Good job, Rex, you found them all." To anyone observing, the moment seemed simple and sweet, a child and her dog sharing quiet satisfaction. But those who understood the events knew the depth of the impact. Together, they had changed the outcome of a legal case, recovered missing evidence, and captured the awe of everyone present. The judge, in a private conversation with the courtroom staff, reflected on the day's events. "I have presided over countless trials, seen many forms of testimony, and witnessed remarkable human endeavors," he said. "But what we observe today is unparalleled. A child's intuition guiding a trained canine to recover evidence, this will be remembered for years." His words circulated quietly among officers and staff, becoming part of the lore surrounding the case. Even within formal proceedings, extraordinary human moments had left their mark. Community members also reacted with admiration. Parents spoke about the story as an example of the potential within children, while animal lovers marveled at the bond between human and dog. Social media comments praised Emma's calm focus, her confidence, and her natural connection with Rex. "This is what real teamwork looks like," one commenter wrote. "No training manuals, no experience, just instinct and trust." Another added, "A tiny hero showing us all how powerful intuition can be." The defendant, confronted with the comprehensive evidence, ultimately faced the consequences of their actions. The recovery of previously missing items, guided in no small part by Emma and Rex, left little room for dispute. Legal proceedings continued in a more conventional manner afterward, but the story of the toddler's extraordinary contribution remained at the heart of public attention. The courthouse had witnessed both justice and marvel simultaneously, a rare confluence of law and wonder. Emma's mother, reflecting privately on the day, realized how unique her daughter's experience had been. "She didn't just watch," she said softly. "She participated in the only way she could through intuition, curiosity, and her connection with Rex. And somehow, that was enough to make a real difference." She squeezed Emma gently, grateful not only for the resolution of the case, but for the reminder that children, with their pure perception, can influence the world in ways adults often overlook. Officer Daniels, reflecting on his years of training, acknowledged the unusual nature of the day. "You can train a dog, you can follow protocols, you can plan for every scenario," he said to a colleague, "but some things like this can't be taught. It's instinct, it's trust, and it's incredible to witness." Rex, calm and attentive, seemed to understand the praise, nuzzling Emma gently as if acknowledging the unique partnership they had formed. As evening fell, the courthouse quieted, and the day's events began to settle into memory. Reporters filed their stories, social media buzzed with excitement, and the community shared in the sense of wonder. Emma, tired from the day but happy, held Rex's paw and whispered softly, "We did it." For her, it had been simple, a day of discovery, guidance, and connection. Yet for everyone else, it had been a day of astonishment, inspiration, and a reminder that remarkable outcomes can emerge from the smallest, most unexpected sources. By nightfall, the story had reached far beyond the courtroom. News outlets across the country ran features on Emma and Rex, highlighting their unique bond and the impact of their actions. Children were inspired, adults marveled, and law enforcement officers reflected on a day when the ordinary became extraordinary. Emma's innocence and intuition had achieved what formal training and experience could not prove, that even the youngest and smallest among us can leave a profound mark on the world. In homes across the nation, the story spread. Parents shared it with their children. Educators discussed it in classrooms. And animal lovers marveled at the synergy between Emma and Rex. Social media posts went viral. Hashtags proliferated, and conversations celebrated a day where justice and wonder intertwined. The small courtroom, once ordinary, had become a landmark of inspiration, where a tiny girl and a loyal dog demonstrated the extraordinary power of instinct, curiosity, and trust. And so, as the night settled over the town, The story of Emma and Rex became a part of local legend and national fascination alike. Justice had been served, evidence recovered, and an improbable partnership had reminded the world that sometimes the most remarkable solutions come from the most unexpected sources. A 3-year-old and a police dog had captured hearts, minds, and imaginations, leaving behind a day that would truly be remembered, a day when innocence, intuition, and loyalty converged to achieve something extraordinary.